All right, I will say good morning, everyone. Let us begin a good Chodesh. Begin by thanking our sponsors, our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Tishrei. Still till Tishrei today. So we'll thank our Talmud Torah sponsor for the month of Tishrei, Avraham and Shaindy Kelman, for dedicating all of the Shiurim and Drushos this month in memory of their beloved parents. To thank Jack Bennett for dedicating the Drushos this month in honor in memory of Givati Brigade First Sergeant Nikolai Rappaport, and Dr. Linda Weinberg for dedicating all the Shiurim this month in memory of her husband, Dr. Paul Weinberg, Peretz Moshe and Avraham David. We also thank our week of learning sponsors, Avron, Shaan, and Judah Elbaum, for dedicating the Shiurim this week in the merit of a Refua Shleima for Ami ben Chaya. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, Kol Chole Yisrael have a complete and enduring Refua, all of the Neshama Shav and Aliyah, and the families a Nechama. And also with that, let us begin. So we are picking up today's Daf is Lamed Vav 36, and we are actually picking up on the top of Lamed Vav. Very first line. So remember again, we left off mid-discussion yesterday. The Mishnah told us that halacha l'maisa on Yom Tiv, mashilin peros derech haruba. You are permitted to go ahead and lower fruit if you have fruit drying on a roof and it begins to rain, you want to get it out of the rain, you can go ahead and lower the fruit via a skylight. The Gemara was trying to discuss or understand how much fruit, right? Is there a cap on the amount of fruit that you are permitted to move in this particular fashion? So the Gemara contrasted this with a case from Shabbos, right? The case from Shabbos was you have barrels or we'll call it barrels or receptacles of hay, right, or straw, and you need to move it bidl beis hamedrash because again you need room for the shear or because you're having guests. So the Gemara over there the Gemara explained that it was mefanin arba v'chamish kupos. You could move 4 or 5 barrels, 4 or 5 boxes of straw. So the Gemara was trying to figure out, does that same shear, does that same amount apply to this halacha or not? So says the Gemara, let's begin. Top of Lamed Vav. Tanan Hasam, avalo asa otzar. Interestingly enough, by Shabbos, you're permitted to move 4 or 5 baskets or boxes of straw, but halacha l'maisa lo ha'otzar. What does that mean? Look at Rashi, tap Rashi. Shelo yigmar ha'otzar, im lo hayu sham ela arba o chamesh kupos, she'etiru lo b'makom sheish yoser kan, lo etiru lefnosan kulan, v'legalos es haritzba, delma havi be'guma umashvela. So we'll say this is quite fascinating. So the Gemara explains very beautifully that the issue over here is as follows, which is that if you're clearing out these baskets or these boxes of straw in order to go ahead and make room for hachnasas arachim or to make room for the beis medrash, you cannot clear out all of the boxes and expose the floor. What are we concerned about? That perhaps once you expose the floor, you will find that there are some uneven areas on the floor, and you will come to be mashve gumos. Mashve gumos means to flatten out the floor. Now, interestingly enough, we saw this in Smichas Chavra a little bit. Being mashve gumos, what's the problem with flattening a floor on Shabbos? What's the answer? It depends where you're doing it. Right? Inside of a home, it could be an issue of bona, of building. In a field, it could be an issue, ultimately, again, of Zora Harisha, of preparing a field for planting. In any event, so Va'amar Shmuel, my avalo ha'otzar, what does it mean lo ha'otzar? Avalo yigmar ha'otzar kulo, dilma asi lashviye gumos. Hachamai. So we'll say, what's the halach over here? So that's a din by Shabbos. What's the halach over here by Yom Tiv? Are you allowed to clear off all of the fruit from the rooftop? Or do we need to be concerned that halacha l'maisi, if you clear off all the fruits from the rooftop, you'll level out the rooftop? Maybe we only have to be machmir by Shabbos, because Shabbos is Shabbos. But Yom Tiv, which is a little bit more relaxed in its halachos, perhaps we don't have to worry about this halach. You could even clear off all of the fruit from the roof. Lo, or maybe you could say this, by Shabbos, the reason you're allowed to go ahead and move stuff is why? Because of bittul beis hamedrash. Remember again, the Gemara gave 2 cases by Shabbos. One was because it's beis medrash, you need room for the shear, you need room for Torah. The second, ultimately, again, was hachnasas archim, which is another way of saying that on Shabbos, there's a compelling need. By Yom Tov, the only compelling need is financial loss. So maybe the only license to move stuff in general is by Shabbos, where there's a more compelling need. But by Yom Tov, where it's just a financial loss, maybe not. To which the Gemara says, "V'hacha tanan." Furthermore, again, I will say, so what the Gemara is going to do is contrast a number of these cases between Shabbos and Yom Tov. So v'hacha tanan, here we learned by our Mishnah, by Yom Tov, mashilin peros derech aruba by Yom Tov. You can lower fruit via the skylight on Yom Tov. V'amrav Nachman, lo shanu ela ba'oseh hagag. This is very interesting. You could lower fruit through the skylight on Yom Tov, but it's got to be on that rooftop. However, aval migag legag lo. So I will say, just by the way, as we go on, we'll see the picture that the Gemara is painting is like this. That essentially, the reason why you could move your fruit around on Yom Tov, even though, remember, this was fruit that was spread out to dry. Because it's fruit that's spread out to dry, technically, one could consider it what? Muktzah. But the image over here essentially is you're kind of just pushing it down the skylight. That's what's happening over here. So therefore, the Gemara says, Rav Nachman says, you cannot move this fruit from one roof to another roof. The license to move the fruit through the skylight is on that very roof. But to go ahead and move it from one roof to another roof, you can't do. That supports this first wide line, Lamid Vav Amid Aleph, Ein Metaltlin Migag Legag, Afilo Shegago Sehen Shavin. You cannot carry the fruit from one rooftop to another rooftop, even if the roofs are level, are the same. So the Gemara says, Hasam Mai. So this is the din by Yom Tiv. What's the halacha by Shabbos? So now what's the shalav asking by Shabbos? Shabbos, you told me that I can move 4 or 5 boxes of straw to make room in the base medrash or to make room in my dining room for guests. So now by Yom Tov, we just said you can move fruit, but you can't move fruit from one roof to another roof, right? You can only go ahead and push it down the skylight of the roof that it's on. What's the halacha by Shabbos, right? How much mobility do you have on Shabbos? Do we say, the Gemara says, Hachahu da asr mishum Yom Tov, de kil va'asil zazuli be. On Yom Tov, we prevent you from moving produce from roof to roof because halacha lamaisa, Yom Tov in general is more meko, and we're concerned that if we allow you to start moving stuff from roof to roof, what's going to happen? There's going to be a general degradation, a general zilzal of Yom Tov. Aval Shabbos techamira, v'lo asil zazule be shaper dami. But Shabbos, which everyone treats with incredible intensity, if we allow you to move the straw from one roof to another roof, no one's going to come to be mizalzal. No one's going to come to degrade the sanctity of Shabbos. Odoma, ma hacha di'ika hefsid peros amrit lo. Or you could say the counter argument, when it comes to Yom Tiv, and there's the potential of a financial loss, yet even with financial loss, Chazal still don't allow you to move it from roof to roof. Hasam deleka hefsid peros lakol shekain. In the case of Shabbos, where there is no financial loss, all the more so you're going to have limited mobility. Okay, so the Gemara doesn't answer it. Hacha, we'll say another example. Hacha, Tinan, lo yishalshalim bechaval bechalonos, v'lo yoridim derech sulamos. Well, so listen to this. Furthermore, over here, by Yom Tiv, when moving the fruit, the Mishnati, we learned that you may not lower the fruit with ropes through a window, nor can you take them down by ladders, which again, I both say, all keeps on pointing in the same direction. The ability to move this fruit is essentially, you can push it down the skylight. That's what you can do. What can't you do? You can't start putting it in baskets, lowering it down through windows, or taking it down through ladders. That's not the license in this case. Hachamai, what about by Shabbos? When I'm clearing out these 4 or 5 baskets of straw to make room in the base medrash or to make room in my dining room, so what's the halacha? Can I go ahead and lower the straw with a basket? Can I lower the straw through windows? Can I lower the straw through a ladder? So Hachamai, b'Yom Tov huda asr deleka bitl beis hamedrash. So we'll say on Yom Tov we say that it's asr. Why? Because on Yom Tov the only thing that's driving me is finances, right? It's not like the presence of the fruit is impeding my ability to conduct any of my normative activities of Yom Tov. Therefore, again, that's why there's a restriction. Aval Shabbos the ika bitl beis hamedrash. But by Shabbos, where the presence of the straw prevents me from learning in the base medrash or prevents me from having company, maybe I should be allowed to do it. So the Gemara says, Shabbatami Odilma, Hachadika Hefsid Peros Amrit Lo, or you could say just the opposite, that maybe when it comes to Yom Tiv, even though there's a financial loss, you're still restricted in mobility. Hasam Daleka Hefsid Peros Lakol Shekain, all the more so on Shabbos, where, again, there's an inconvenience, but there is no financial loss involved. Perhaps I should not be able to move it in this way. Therefore, again, the Gemara says, Teku. So we'll say, so the answer to all of these questions is Teku, right? In other words, the Gemara is not clear in terms of how to go ahead and compare the case of Shabbos to Yom Tov. Now, of course, Teku in all of these situations means we rule the chumrah, right? In all of these cases, will just be machmir. So therefore, pretty much whatever is going to be asr in one is going to kind of end up being asr in the other, just by default. Incredible. Amr Ula, supposed to be Givati. Umechasanes aperos. So furthermore, so case number one in the Mishnah was the ability to push the fruit down the skylight. And the chiddush of that was, even though those fruits are spread out to dry, and they were, technically speaking, they were set aside for non-use, you're allowed to push it through the skylight in order to go ahead and save yourself from financial loss. Case number two in the Mishnah was mechasanes aperos. So I'll say this is I have fruit. It's the same case. I have fruit. It's raining, right? Or I have a leak in my house, whatever it is, and the fruit is going to get ruined by the leaking water. So what am I allowed to do? I could cover up the fruit with a kli. Okay, so it says the Gemara, Amar Ula, Vafilu Avira Delivni. So this is very interesting. Ula said, by the way, you could even cover up rows of bricks. Then I will say, now, this is very interesting. If you take a look at Rashi says, Vafilu Avira Delivni, Levenim Hasadurim Umuktzim Lebinyan, Ugeshamim Notfim, Umesyare Shalo Yamuchu, Mutul Taltal Kalim Litzarchan, Ulechasosan, Velo Aminan Hall Behin Atzman Enotlin, so listen to this. So Ula comes along and says, not only can you cover fruit, but let's say you have bricks. You have leftover bricks, Rashi says, right? Or I should say not even leftover bricks. You have rows of bricks that are set aside for building. The problem is, if it rains on the bricks too much, it erodes the quality of the brick. So you, on Yom Tiv, want to cover the bricks in order that they don't get ruined. Ula says, that's mutter. Then I will say, now why is that a chiddush? Because you might have thought, we saw this in Hilchos Muktzah, you might have thought that you only have a license to move a kli to benefit something else, which itself can be used on Yom Tiv, in this case Yom Tiv, or Shabbos for that matter. But if the item you're covering is muktzah, which a brick that is set aside for building is muktzah, then I might have thought that halacha lamaisa, I don't have the ability to move something else for the benefit of that item. So if the item being covered is muktzah, I don't have a right to move a kli to benefit that item. Ula says, Kamash Malon, yes you can. The same way that you could cover fruit when it's raining, you could also go ahead and even cover a row of bricks, even though those bricks are set aside for building, and therefore again muktzah. So Rabbi Yitzchak Omer Peros HaRu'uyim. Rabbi Yitzchak says no. Rabbi Yitzchak says, no, that's not true. In other words, the only reason you're allowed to go ahead and cover the fruit is because the fruit are fit for consumption. So you could only move a kli on Yom Tiv, and this is also for Shabbos. You can only move a kli on Yom Tiv or Shabbos to benefit something which itself is usable on Shabbos / Yom Tiv. But if the item you're covering is not usable, then you may not move another kli to cover that on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Look at Rashi. Rabbi Yitzchak Amar, Dafka Peiros Haru'in L'Tiltul Hu D'Shar Rabban L'Taltlam Kelim L'Tzarchan Aval Midi Delav Bar Tiltul Ein Kli Nitel L'Tzarchan. That's a very important phrase. Any kli which itself is not usable, another kli may not be moved on Shabbos or Yom Tiv to service that item. So both say fundamental machlokes ula Rabbi Yitzchak. I will say there's a fundamental machlokes in Hilchos Muktzah. When something is muktzah, can you move another kli to cover the muktzah item? Ula says yes. Rabbi Yitzchak says no. Says Rabbi Azra, Rabbi Yitzchak Tamei. Rabbi Yitzchak goes according to his reasoning. The Rabbi Yitzchak ein kli nitel ela davar hanitel b'Shabbos. Rabbi Yitzchak says, we'll say this is Rabbi Yitzchak's position by Hilchos Muktzah, that you cannot move a kli to service a muktzah item on Shabbos or Yom Tiv. To which the Gemara says, Davar nital b'Shabbos Tanan mechasin as haperos bekelim. And the truth is, the Mishnah seems to back this up, because what does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says you could cover fruit with kelim on Shabbos. Peros in avira delivni lo. You could infer from the Mishnah, it's dafka fruit that you could cover with a kli, but bricks you can't. I mean, the Mishnah is purposely choosing its case, a fruit, which seems to back up Rabbi Yitzchak, to which the Gemara says not necessarily lo. Who have din dafi lo avir delivni? Maybe not. It could be that according to the Mishnah, you could even move a kli to cover a row of bricks. Va'aydid detana reisha mashilin peros. Tani sefer nami mechasan es haperos. So we'll say, if it's true that you could even move a kli to cover bricks, so why does the Mishnah use the example of covering fruit? Simple. Textual symmetry. The Mishnah opened with a case of fruit, and therefore just continues with the same example of fruit. But don't necessarily read into the Mishnah a support for Ula and a refutation of Rabbi Yitzchak's position. Says the Gemara Tanan, v'chein kadei yain v'chein kadei shemen. Remember, the Mishnah said the same thing. Let's say you have jugs of wine or jugs of oil that are getting ruined by water, getting ruined by rain or by a leak. The Mishnah also said you're permitted to go ahead and halacha l'maisa cover the jugs with a kli. So the Gemara says halacha ma'askinon. So this again, I will say b'pashtos. This is also another example of moving a kli to cover something which itself is permitted on Shabbos and Yom Tiv. To which Gemara says maybe not halacha ma'askinon. What are we talking about over here? B'tivla. Interesting. Maybe we're talking about wine or oil which are tevel. We'll say meaning tevel means what? Untithed produce. What's the status of untithed produce on Shabbos and Yom Tiv? Muktzah. So again, this could be talking about a case also of moving a kli to cover a muktzah item. Because if we were just talking about wine and oil of heter, so tana l'reisha peros kadiyayim v'kadei shemen it's shrichale. So we'll say then it would be repetitive. Because if the jugs of oil and jugs of wine in the Mishnah are totally permitted, then the case is absolutely repetitive. It's the same thing as the case of fruit. To which the Gemara says, well, maybe not. I'll tell you why. It's strichale, sakadait chamina, lehefsid meruba chashashu, lehefsid muat lo chashashu. See, I said, it's actually quite fascinating. If it would have just said the case of fruit, you might have thought the only license to cover something on Yom Tiv is in a case of hefsid meruba. But in a case of hefsid muat, right, a small loss, perhaps you don't have the license to go ahead and cover the utensil. And I both say it's fascinating, because when I read this Gemara, you would think the case of hefsid meruba is which case? The wine and the oil, right? And the fruit is hefsid muat. It's just the opposite. The case of hefsid muat, I guess the nature of Talmudic wine and Talmudic oil, so if it got a little bit diluted, it wasn't a big deal. Fruit can rot. So therefore, again, kamash malon, you need both cases. So Tanan, so we'll say, so again, so we're clear where we are. We're holding in the middle of a dramatic machlokes, Ula and Rabbi Yitzchak. A machlokes in Hilchos Muktzah. Namely, can you move a kli to cover something which itself cannot be moved? Can I move a kli on Shabbos or Yom Tiv, move a utensil which is not Muktzah, in order to cover something which is muktzah? So Ula says the answer is yes. Rabbi Yitzchak says the answer is no. The answer is no. So therefore, again, let's go weiter. Tanan, nosten kli tachas hadalach b'Shabbos. So as we've seen this case, you can go ahead and place a kli under a leak. Now, b'pashtos, we're assuming that if it's a leak, if you look at Rashi says, nosten kli tachas hadlaf. It's about 5-6 lines before Rashi gets wide. Harisha kli nita lekabel bo muktzah ki haydelo chazi lemidi. Now, both saying, the dlaf, the leak, we're assuming is water that is not really fit for anything. So therefore, essentially what you're doing over here is you're moving a kli to collect something which is muktzah. To which the Gemara says, that seems to be a good indication to support the position of Ula, that a kli could even be moved for a muktzah purpose. To which the Gemara says, no, b'dlaf haroi. What are we talking about over here? Talking about water that's usable. Okay, that was easy. Water that's usable. Tashma, parsin machatzal sagabi levenim b'Shabbos. Let's listen to this. Beitzah says, you could spread out a mat over bricks on Shabbos. Again, seems to be pretty explicit. Bricks, we assume, are muktzah. You're moving a mat, you're spreading out the mat over the bricks in order to save the muktzah. This seems to support Ula. To which the Gemara says, no, the yahrzeit mibinyana, the chazi lemizgalai. What are we talking about? surplus bricks. Bricks that were left over after building, which you could use to recline on. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, they are not muktzah. So tashma, parsin machatzelas al gabi avanim b'Shabbos. You could spread out bricks over stones on Shabbos. Abosai, bepashtos, stones are muktzah. Yet you're allowed to go ahead and spread the cloth over, or whatever you're spreading over the kli, over the bricks, in order to save the bricks. Is it the stones? I'm sorry. To which the Gemara says, no. What kind of stones are we talking about? Ba'avanim mikorzalos techazyon labeis hakisei. Sharpened stones that people use after they relieve themselves. Also, we've seen in our journeys through Shas, we've spoken much about these stones. Right? Again, don't try this at home. But Lamaisa, again, clearly it was the way that they cleaned themselves after relieving themselves. So that's the stones we're talking about over here. Right? Those stones, of course, are not muktzah. Tashma, parsin, machanzelas, salgabe, kavaras devorim. So this is an interesting case. You could spread a machanzelas as a mat. Kavaras devorim is a beehive. You could spread a mat over a beehive on Shabbos. Bechama mipnei achama, either to protect it from the sun, or begisham ne'agishamim, and ultimately, or from the rain, or bilvad shelo yiskavein lotzod. In order, as long as you have in mind, not to trap the bees. Not to trap the bees. So I will say, now, bepashtos, a beehive is muktzah. A beehive is muktzah. Yet the halacha is that you're allowed to spread a mat in order to protect it from the sun or in order to protect it from the rain. So here you're moving a kli to benefit a muktzah item. To which the Gemara says, Hasam nami di'ika dvash. Oh no, what's the case? The case is there's honey in the hive. So therefore the hive is not muktzah. The hive is not muktzah because you're allowed to go ahead and access the honey. Amrali Rav Ukva Mimeshon Ravashi Hatenach Bimosa Chamadi Kedvash Bimosa Gishamai Kalemer. That's fine during the summer, because in the summer there is honey in the hive, but during the winter there is not. And yet again, remember it says because of the rain is associated with the winter. So the Gemara says Lo Nitzcha Ela Osan Shtei Chalos. What is very interesting. It refers to the two chalos. What's the two chalos? The two honeycombs. In other words, in a beehive, you always made sure to maintain honey inside of the hive so that during the winter, the bees could subsist on those honeycombs. Interestingly enough, the Gemara says those honeycombs are also accessible to me. So therefore, by definition, the hive is not muktzah. Osan shtei chalos muktzah sein. But says the Gemara, 1 second, those two chalos, right? Those two honeycombs really are muktzah because they're set aside for use for the bees. Rashi says muktzah here, here muktzah literally means set aside. Muktzah in Rashi says lidvorim. They're set aside for the bees. To which the Gemara says, Hachama, what's the case? Shechashav aleim, where you had in mind before Shabbos that you're going to partake of the honey in the honeycombs. Okay. Avalo chashav aleim. Let's say, so again, if it's talking about during the winter, and you had in mind to partake of the honeycombs prior to Shabbos, fine, so then it's not muktzah. But if you didn't have in mind, Lamaisa, it's going to be muktzah. And perhaps you should not be able to go ahead and move a mat in order to cover it. To which the Gemara says, if that's the case, Adatani ubilvachle is kabin lotzud. Instead of the Beitzah saying that you could cover the hive as long as you don't have in mind to trap the bees, lifno v'lisnei bididei, go ahead and literally, you could split the case into two. Bamed v'amamurim, when is it true that you could cover the hive during the winter? The Gemara is bedra amurim shechashav aleim, when you had in mind to partake of the honeycomb. Avalo chashav aleim, but if you didn't have in mind to partake of the honeycomb, aser. It's aser. In other words, why even bring in the whole issue of tzed, of trapping? Just go ahead and divide the case between having in mind to partake of the honeycomb and not having in mind. Hachikam, this is what it means to say. Even if you had in mind to partake of the honeycomb, what the Bryce is just adding in over here, both say, is that there's two concurrent issues. There's an issue of muktzah and there's an issue of tzeda. Right? So the issue of muktzah is remedied in the summertime. You really don't have such an issue of muktzah. Why? Because there's available honey, right? In the winter time, you take care of the issue of muktzah by having in mind on Erev Shabbos to partake of the honeycomb. But even if you take care of the issue of muktzah, be cognizant that there is a secondary issue. And what is the secondary issue? Tzeda, trapping the bees. So make sure that when you cover the comb, you cover it in a way which does not result in trapping of the bees. Okay, incredible. So the Gemara says, "B'mayo kimta." So we'll say, how are you establishing this case? Rabbi Yehuda de Islay Muktzah. Right? Remember, this whole discussion is in line with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, who holds of a more global definition of Muktzah. Ema Seifa, look at the end of that brisa. Obavad shlo yiskavein lotzud. As what did the brisa say? You could cover the honeycomb, you could cover the hive, as long as you don't have kavana, right, to trap the bees. I saw in the Rabbi Shimon. Both say this reflects the view of Rabbi Shimon, because what does Rabbi Shimon say? The Amar davar she'ein miskavein mutter. Rabbi Shimon says, as long as you don't have kavana for malacha on Shabbos, it's mutter. So as long as you don't have kavana to trap the bees, your act is going to be mutter. V'tizbara, Rabbi Shimon, v'ha'abai v'rava damri tarvaihu, mod Rabbi Shimon b'psik reisha v'lo yamos. Rabbi say, here's the problem. Even Rabbi Shimon who holds, there's a lot of stuff going on over here. Even Rabbi Shimon who holds that a davar she'ein miskavein is mutter, an unintended act is going to be mutter, agrees that a psik reisha, remember again, what's the psik reisha? What's the psik reisha? A definitive act. In other words, I could have something that is unintended, but if I know there is a definitive consequence, even Rabbi Shimon will say that it is mutter. If that's the case, halacha l'maisa, if I know that by covering the hive, it is going to trap the bees, even if that's not my kavana, if it's a psik reisha, it should be asur. To which the Gemara says, you're right. The Olam kul Rabbi Hudi. The entire brayso reflects the view of Rabbi Huda. What's the case? V'chamay askinon de'is be'kavi. Rabbi will say, interestingly enough, the beehive has windows. This is a high-end beehive, right? Right? All the amenities, right? So what does it mean it has windows? Again, it means it has openings, right? As opposed to, I guess, a regular beehive, which maybe only has one opening. This beehive has a number of different openings. And therefore, halacha l'maisa, Rashi says over here, the ispe kavi chalonos. Yesh b'daf noseh, third line up from the bottom. V'apa pisha mechase es piha, einon nitzodin im lo yechase gamas hachalonos. So we'll say the idea that Rabbi Huda is saying is when you cover the hive, if you cover the primary entrance, make sure not to cover the windows. Because if you cover the windows of the hive, then you have created what? A tzeda, a trapping situation. Incredible. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Huda, and therefore again, don't read it as saying, as long as you don't have kavana to go ahead and trap the bees. Amud beis, ela ema, obilvad shalo ya'asenu mitzuda. Rather, the way it should read is that this works fine as long as you don't have kavanah to make it a trap. That's what Rabbi Yehuda is saying over here. As long as you don't have in mind to make it into a bee trap. To which the Gemara says, Pshita, isn't that obvious? Supposed to listen to this. Ma'adatema, this is actually quite fascinating. Ma'adatema, what would you have thought? B'mino nitzud, aser, shalo b'mino nitzud, mutter. So say there's a lot of stuff going on over here, right? There's Hilchos Muktzah, there's Hilchos Tzeda. So here's what's fascinating, right? Tzad, right? Tzeda is one of the 39 malachas. You're not allowed to trap an animal on Shabbos or Yom Tiv. So I will say, we saw this before. Interestingly enough, there's an interesting havamina. Perhaps the malacha of Tzeda only applies to animals which are normally trapped. But animals which are not normally trapped, perhaps the malacha doesn't apply to them. Sefer will say, I might have thought that halacha l'maisa, do you trap bees? Do you trap bees? No. You kill bees, right? You go, in other words, trapping a bosa means an animal that you want. It doesn't, see, you would think to yourself, of course you trap bees, right? Because you don't want them, no. Trapping means I trap something because I want it. Not that I trap it because I want to get rid of it. So the havamina is, I might have thought that the malacha of tzeda only applies to the types of animals which are normally trapped. Look at Rashi. Ma'al detemer tap Rashi and Amud beis. Davar shemamino nitzot shederech lotzut es b'nei mino kigon chaya va'of aval hay de'in b'mino nitzot shari. So I might have thought that the malach of tzeda only applies to animals which are normally trapped, like animals, like behemoths and chayas. But for bees, perhaps that doesn't apply. Kamash balano, Rabbi Huda says the malach of tzeda applies even to bees. So we'll say, we're going back to the Beitzah. Rashi says, Mi katani b'mosacham ubigimosach yishamim. Did the Beitzah say that you could cover the beehive during the winter and the summer. That's not what it said. Rather, it said, rather, it said you could cover it in the heat, during the heat because of the heat, and during the rain because of the rain. So I will say, what is this referring to? Biyome Nisan ubiyome Tishrei. What is it referring to? I will say, it's referring dafka to Nisan and Tishrei. What's unique about Nisan and Tishrei? Di'ika chama, di'ika gishamim, di'ika dvash. So I will say, the months of Nisan and Tishrei are interesting because they can have both rain and heat, and both of those months also have honey in the hive. So therefore, again, halacha l'maisa, there's not really a muktzah issue, because halacha l'maisa, since there's honey, therefore halacha l'maisa, the hive is usable by the human owner. So I will say, so remember, all of this was a machlokes Rabbi Yitzchak and Ula, which is halacha l'maisa, again, for hilchos muktzah. Can you move a kli on Shabbos or Yom Tiv to service something which is muktzah? Ula is saying yes. Rabbi Yitzchak saying no. We paskin like Ula, that you are allowed to move a kli on Shabbos or Yom Tov, a non-muktzah kli, in order to service a muktzah item. That is halacha l'maisa permitted. Because we'll say essentially, the machlokes is looking at, do you look at function or do you look at goal? Right? So Rabbi Yehuda says, if you're servicing something muktzah, that's called an act of muktzah. Ula says, we look at the utensil itself. Is the utensil muktzah? Is the utensil not muktzah? If it's not muktzah, who cares where you're moving it or why you're moving it? It just simply doesn't matter. That's how you pass in halacha l'maisa, that as long as the kli itself is not muktzah, you can use it to go ahead and cover something which is muktzah. Now, I will say there is a secondary related discussion over here, which here, well, let's see right now. So we'll say this is very interesting. You are permitted to go ahead and put a kli underneath the rain, right? Underneath the rain or underneath the leak. Really, dlaf means the leakage, right? You're permitted to go ahead and put it under that which is dripping in order to catch it. So remember, I just want to point out, the Gemara quoted this case before. Remember again, how did the Gemara interpret it? That it was talking about water that is fit for use. Now the truth is, that's not necessarily the pashat pshat in this case. You're going to see it. It says the Gemara, Tana, in the smali hakli, if the utensil fills up with the water, shofech v'shona ve'inon nimne. You could keep going ahead and pouring it out. Right? You could keep going ahead and pouring it out, even the entire day if you need to. Okay, so let's see, here we go. Listen to this story. Kirachia da Abaye. There was a story of the millstones of Abaye. So the Gemara says, Dolph. So there was water dripping on the millstones of Abaye. Now I will say, the problem with water dripping on the millstones is the millstones were made, Rashi says, out of mortar. If water continuously drips on them, they will erode. So Abaye comes, so listen to this. Abaye, this water dripping on Abaye's millstone. Abaye says an incredible Maisa. Also lekamei de Rabba. Abaye came to Rabba. Amar says, Rabbi, what should I do? Amar lei, listen, this is wild. Zil aile lepurech lahasam. Bring your bed into the area where the millstone is. Bring your bed in there. Dehavi kigraf shel rei. Because this way, the millstone will become like graf shel rei. They both say, this is absolutely incredible. I both say, the halacha of graf shel rei is a din in muktzah. Graf shel rei literally means a bedpan. A bedpan. If you have a bedpan in a room in which you are present, the halacha is, and you're spending a lot of time there, the halacha is you're allowed to take out the bedpan. Isn't the bedpan muktzah? And what's the answer? Chazal suspended the laws of muktzah for the purpose of kavod habrios. So it's in muktzah, right? For the purposes of human dignity, Chazal went ahead and suspended the laws of muktzah. So you could take out the bedpan, you could wash it out, and as many times as you need to take it out over the course of the day. Now, the dispensation of graf shel rei only applies where? In an area where you are currently existing and spending a lot of time. In other words, if there's a graf shel rei in another room, I'll give you the classic example of this. Are you allowed to take out garbage from your house on Shabbos? Yes. Garbage is muktzah. Graf shel rei allows you to take out the garbage. Now, What can't you do? If you took out the garbage and you left it by the back door, right? You left it on the back door, you can't come back later on Shabbos and then take it to the garbage can. Because once the graf sharei is out of your house, it's muktzah. It's muktzah. So you have a license to take it out of your house, and once it's in your hand, Halachos Muktzah says, once you have a right to carry something, you could take it, you could put it into your garbage, you could throw it on the neighbor's lawn, you could put it wherever you want, right? Once it's in your hand, beheter, you could drop it off wherever you want. But once that garbage is out of your house, done. We're done until the end of Shabbos. Because the din of graf sharei only applies when the quote-unquote offensive item is with you, is in your face. So listen to this. Abaye's millstone is eroding because the water is dripping on it. He comes to Rabba. Rabba says, listen, here's what you need to do. Move your bed into the area where the millstone is. Now, therefore what? If you move your bed into the area of the millstone, suddenly again, in your bedroom, there's graf sharei. There's graf sharei. And what happens? So the Gemara says, "V'havilav graf sharei, v'afke," and then ultimately again, Rashi says over here, Zil aye the Purak lahasam. Rashi says over here, Lebayi shusham the lahavi graf sharei sheyu muusim harechaim lecha shlios lifnei mitascha v'atam muter letaltalon uleotzim lecha. So you both say, at that point in time, Rabbi says to Abaye, when your bed is inside the same room with the millstone becomes the graf sharei. That's graf sharei over here. Because it's eroding. It's eroding. So it's disgusting. So then what? You have the license to move the millstone out of the room. That's the Eitzah. Yosef Abaye, say, get ready for this. Say, Yosef Abaye got the Eitzah. Because Kashile. So he heard what his Rebbe told him, but he had a kasha. Vichi osin graf sharei lechatchila. Are you allowed to do that? Are you allowed to lechatchila create a graf sharei? Say, Abaye's bed was not in that room. The millstone by themselves are not a graf sharei. Rabbi is advising him, create a graf sharei situation. And Abaye thinks to himself, are you allowed to lechatchila to create a graf sharei situation? Adahachi, as he was contemplating this, nafal be'rechai d'Abaye. His millstone was destroyed. Amar, tisi li. So Abaye says, you know what, I deserved it. The Avri Adimar, because I transgressed the words of my Rebbe. So ultimately, again, I will say a very profound story, because Abaye felt that Rabbi, he went to his Rebbe, he asked his Rebbe Yeshayla, the Rebbe gave him an Eitzah, he questioned the wisdom of his Rebbe, and so ultimately, again, this happened. I think that there's another so again, in general, this is an interesting idea about how in general we relate to advice that we get, which is fascinating. Again, this is a Abaye and Rabbah. So Rabbah is Rabbah. So one can make the strong argument when Rabbah tells you something, just do it and don't question it. But I think that there's another profound lesson in this, which is sometimes the results of overanalyzing something. Sometimes, again, there's a problem, there's a solution. And sometimes we spend so much time perseverating over the solution. Oh, what about this? Or what about that? Or how about this? How about that? And you know what that creates? That creates analysis paralysis. And what happens when you suffer from analysis paralysis? Stuff crumbles all around you. See, sometimes in life you have to think things through, but then you have to be ready to take decisive action. There are people who constantly want to think more and analyze more and contemplate this. And did we consider this? Did we consider that? What about this possibility, that possibility, this opinion, that opinion? Again, is it good to think things through? Absolutely. But at a certain point in time, you have to move forward. You have to take decisive action. Because if you don't, the structures of life and the possibilities of life come crumbling down all around you. Amr Shmuel, graf sharei v'avashamei raglayim mot ashpa. So we'll say, here's the case. Graf sharei. So right now, we'll say graf sharei literally means a container which contains excrement. That is literally what it means. But it comes to represent in halacha anything that is a bit repulsive. V'avashamei raglayim, a bowl of urine. Mutter lo tzion la'ashpa. You're permitted to go in and carry them out to the garbage dump. Ukishu machziro. Again, I just want to point out over here, this is very important because often this is misunderstood by muktzah. So the halacha by muktzah is that once you're permitted to move something, you don't have to put it down at the first available moment. Once you're permitted to move it, you could take it wherever you need to take it. So, the classic case of this is you left your hammer on your dining room table, right? Hammer is a kli shemalachta le'isser. You can move it l'tzorech gufo makomo. When you pick it up, you don't have to drop it at the first available, spot off the dining room table. Once you're allowed to pick it up, you could put it away wherever you want. So you want to put it away in the attic, you want to put it away in the basement, you're allowed to take it to wherever you need to take it. Same with graf sharei. Not only are you allowed to move it from the area in which you are residing, but you could take it wherever it needs to be taken. Zero, and when you bring it back, no sing bomayim umach zero. You could put some water in it, and ultimately, again, you can bring it back. Now Rashi says over here, no snin bomayim mach zero, demuktzin machmas miosein, v'ilav agav maya lo motzila taltalinhu, ulo tzio, hu disharlim mishum kvoda. Let's listen to this. The Gemara is saying, when you bring the graf sharei back, you should put a little bit of usable water. Now, when we say usable, not for you, right? But for your animals, right? For your animals. The idea being over here, technically speaking, when you empty out that graf sharei, I will say that's muktzah. It's muktzah machmas mios. It's disgusting. So how do you circumvent the muktzah machmas mios issue? Put a little bit of water in it. Right, so as long as an animal could drink the water, then ultimately, again, I could carry it back in. Umach zero. Savar mine, graf sharei agav mana in, bifnei atzmanol. I will say, now what the Gemara suggests is as follows. It's very interesting to note that the way the Gemara illustrates the case of graf sharei is how? Where the offensive item is in a kli. So it sounds like the only way you can handle an offensive item is when it's housed in a kli. But to touch the item itself, whatever the offensive item might be, does not sound like it's mutter. To which the Gemara says, Tashma, tu achbarta de ishtachach be aspanki de Rav Ashi. There was once a mouse that was found amongst the spices of Rav Ashi. They found a dead mouse. So Amr lahu Rav Ashi, nakta b'tzutzisa v'afkua. Take it by the tail and throw it out. You got to have a guy for that, right? Even Rav Ashi said to someone, whoever that someone was, right? Do me a favor, why don't you just get that out of here? Right? So the idea, why we bring up this case? Because again, he's taking the mouse by itself. So you see over here that the din of graf sharei doesn't only apply when the offensive item is in a kli, but graf sharei allows you to even handle the offensive item directly. Beautiful. Says the Mishnah. Kol shechayav. This is, we are about to start. We only have, 3 more days left of Be'ah, 4 more days left of Be'ah. We're going to see now, we're going to begin out incredible Mishnah, incredible sugya that'll take us into tomorrow. Kol shechayava mishum shavus, mishum rishos, mishum mitzvah b'shabis, chayovin aleher alav b'yontes. Shabbos, the Mishnah is now introducing us to 3 categories. We'll at least begin this today. There is what's called a shavus. Shavus are things that you are not allowed to do midrabanan. Okay, so we've had extensive, exposure to that. So anything that's a shos, we'll say rishos are things that have like a little bit of a mitzvah association, are kind of what we'll call like quasi mitzvos, but not complete mitzvos. And of course, a mitzvah is a mitzvah. So what the Mishnah is saying is anything that you're in any shavus, rishos, or mitzvah that you can't do on Shabbos, you also can't do on Yom Tov. Take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says over here, Kol shechayv alav midivrei sofrim shelo la'asos b'Shabbos mishum shavus or mishum rishos sheish bo ketzas mitzvah avalo mitzvah gidola v'karav hu lihios davar harishos v'yish bo midivrei sofrim or mishum mitzvah. So we'll say, so again, anything that on Shabbos you can't do because it's an Isser D'Rabbanan, or it's, even if it's a little bit of a mitzvah rishos, but you still can't do it, or it's a mitzvah, but you still can't do it, which is another way of saying anything that's prohibited on Shabbos is going to be prohibited on Yom Tov itself. Let's give some examples. We'll see some examples of things that you can't do because they are Isser D'Rabbanan. Lo olin bi'ilan. You can't climb a tree. Again, we'll discuss the reasons for this. Lo rochban al gabi behema. You can't ride an animal. V'lo shatin al pnei hamayim. You're not allowed to swim. V'lo mitapchim. V'lo mesapkin. Right? You can't clap your hands against each other. You can't clap your hand against your thigh. You can't dance. Rabbi said these are all examples of things that Chazal said you can't do because of Shavuos. And Isser D'Rabbanan, and we'll discuss why that is. Ve'eluhein mishum rishos. Here are other examples of things you can't do because of Rishus. Rabbi said Rishus means what? things that have like a quasi-mitzvah identity, but you still can't do them. Lo danin, we don't adjudicate cases. Lo mekadshin, we don't do kiddushin, we don't get married. Lo choltzin, we don't do chalitza. But lo miyavmin, you can't do yibum. Ve'elohei mishum mitzvah. And I will say third category are things that are mamish mitzvah, but you still can't do them on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Lo makdishin, you can't make something hekdish. V'lo ma'arichin, you can't create an erech vow, which is when you vow the value of a certain item. V'lo machrimim, you cannot make a cherem vow, which is when you give something to the Beis HaMikdash. V'lo makbiin truma u'maiser. You cannot go ahead and separate out trumas and maisros. Kol elu b'yom tov amru. All of these things are asr on Yom Tov, kal v'chomer b'Shabbos. All the more so on Shabbos. Ein bein Yom Tov l'Shabbos, ela ochal nefesh bilbad. For the only distinction between Shabbos and Yom Tov is that on Yom Tov you have the license of ochal nefesh. Rabosai, Emir Tashem, tomorrow we will cover this riveting sugya. Shkoyach and a good chodesh. Good morning. Give me 1 second.
Big day. Big day.
One second, I'm sorry.
It's on there.